We are live now on the Truthscript Wednesday podcast. I didn't want to do the Lego movie thing and say Truthscript Tuesday on a Wednesday. I just decided to forego that and have our first ever Truthscript Wednesday. So that's what we're doing today. We have a number of great articles on the Truthscript website to go over. One of them actually made me tear up a little bit. We may talk about that. But here to join me to talk about that as well is my brother, David Harris, who's also the president of Truthscript. We practice nepotism here, so I'm just the secretary, which I don't think that has any authority. But David has tons of authority. So if you have questions for David in the live chat about Truthscript or any of that, be sure to talk to him about that. I'm getting a message that Rumble's not coming through, so I'm going to work on that. But while I'm working on it, why don't we just start going through the articles, David? I don't know if there's anything you want to say before we start doing that.
I'm ready to go. I got my neocon mug, so I think we're set.
All right. Oh, nice. Yeah, that's all right. Well, let's start here then. This is actually an article for next week because it's Wednesday today, and that was posted this morning. But we have three today. The first one is by Bob Colton, who I think is a pastor, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, or a professor, I guess.
He was a professor for
a
long time. He's an older gentleman, but he was at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. That's SWBTS. No, SBTS. Southwestern. Isn't that where Paige Patterson was?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. It says right on. Bob Colton was a professor of psychology and counseling at Dallas Baptist University. So you, offended everyone. I don't know if anyone's offended by that. I mean, Dallas is. I think that's a pretty good school from as far as academically. I think I don't know if that's Dallas Theological Seminary though. We're really getting stuck in the weeds here, but
he is a Baptist.
He's a Baptist. He's a Baptist. We can affirm that. Also, and it looks like you're right. Also, I think he taught at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, member of Heritage Baptist Church. Now, he wrote this article that I thought was kind of interesting on deconstructing, and so I put the word exvangelical out there. But you've talked about this a little bit. What do you think the thesis of this article is?
I mean, it's definitely like a more reformed argument, but basically that like the crux of it is that. And it says verbatim, an inadequate understanding of the depravity of man is the reason that he gives, or his argument that there's so much deconstruction today, which I think is definitely valid. I mean, I immediately thought of like a ton of examples of deconstruction that I'm personally familiar. And it kind of seems like a daily thing at this point, and not just with major leaders, like he kind of starts off talking about, but people that I know or we know personally, and then you just see something on Facebook or some other app, or you hear something from somebody that they changed their genders and moved to I don't know Minneapolis and helped burn it down in 2020, and you're just like, what in the world happened?
Yeah, I've had that a few times. I mean, I think everyone has to some extent, and it is quite startling. I think one of them was seeing someone I knew from college who was in the Christian group, and now she has an OnlyFans account, and I guess that's how she's making her money. And no, I didn't see her on OnlyFans. I saw it. I think it was a Facebook thing or something, and I'm like, wait a minute, it's just obviously not in a Christian setting anymore. And another one recently that I saw. Actually, it wasn't that recently. It was a year ago, but it was someone who I knew growing up for years, who was very active in Christian ministries and also, homeschooling and things like that. And she made a public post about how she's in a relationship with two other people. So it's not even a marriage, it's a throuple. Right. And just, you just don't like hear from these people for years. The last you saw them, they seem to be doing pretty well, or at least they seemed like they were semi-solid, and then all of a sudden, boom, this happened. So anyway, it touches a lot of people. And I mean, what do you think the Reformed way of approaching this is? Like, what's the explanation for it?
Well, I mean, what he goes into is that, essentially, if you deconstruct, it's evidence that you were never saved to begin with. Which it's funny because, like, I mean, I live in Tennessee now. I've lived here for 10 months, and you know, I lived in New York. I mean, you live you live in the same house that I did for a long time now, because I used to rent from my older brother, and
Yep.
I kind of forget that a lot of these sort of gimmicky. This is kind of what he goes into a little bit. That these sort of gimmicky, over the top altar call, super emotive, like corporate style churches that kind of are more of a brand. And he's kind of touching the theological part of it, but one thing that he kind of made me think of in this article is the cultural part of it. And in the South, like, this is still a big thing. This is still going on pretty extensively. That salvation is almost like a something that you sign up for, like a country club, like something that you sort of, and very
Right.
regular people that I work with and stuff. Oh yeah, I go to church. Oh yeah, my Sunday school class. I went with my Sunday school class to go do this or go do that, and it's just strange. Like in New York, you didn't have a lot of that as much because it's a little more black and white and more spiritually dark areas. But in the Bible Belt, you still have kind of a where people will live according to sort of a cultural um, set of ideals, mostly I mean, the area I live is mostly Baptist, and like there's a lot of upsides to it. Like there's a lot of good things about it, but I forgot that this kind of thing existed, where it's more of an emotional thing, or you grow up in it, you don't question it, and then people deconstruct, or I mean, we used to say backslide. That's kind of, now they say deconstruct, but that's the people who are actually deconstructing have taken ownership of that word. And I think Bob Colton used the right word, because that's what people are applying to themselves. But they wear it as a badge of honor now, and it's almost like the funny thing too is, it's not, deconstruction is usually related to, more than anything else, is related to like sexual ethics. That's the thing that you hear the most today. Well, the Christians were really mean to gay people. The Christians were really mean. And like I realized, like, I didn't have to be a part, so I started to deconstruct. And so I don't know. Those are things that he brought up that I thought about. But to answer your main question, the Reformed angle on, like, why does this happen, is that the method of evangelism, the sort of mass, like, everybody's a sinner, and if you pray this prayer, then you can come to know Jesus today and come on to the front, minimizes like your need for conviction of sin. And one way would be that it doesn't apply to you directly, like it applies to sort of everybody equally. Like, don't take that as an offense. Like, everybody's a sinner. You have your sin, and a lot of time that's used to downplay certain sins that you don't want to touch on, because it's not culturally, you're trying to be culturally sensitive. So if you downplay sin and you downplay depravity, then ultimately you don't really have a need for salvation. And of course, you're going to deconstruct because you never really needed to construct to begin with.
Yeah, there's a quote I was looking for, and I can't find it now, but I was reading a book called The Demon in Democracy. I've read it before, and I'm rereading it. And the author, it's interesting because he's a Polish, he lived in Eastern Bloc country. He lived in, I guess, Poland under communism, and he decided to immigrate. I don't know exactly what Western country he immigrated to, but he spent most of his adult life, I guess, now in the West. And what he found when he got there was that socialism, or the communism, I should say, that he was under, and Western democracies had a great many things in common. And one of the things he talks about is the way they view the church. And without getting into the details too deeply here, the thing that relates to this article in my mind is that he said, I think he's Catholic, so but he didn't seem like too biased. He seemed like he was pretty objective with how he treated this. But he did say Protestants had this tendency to focus on the private profession, the privatization of the faith in a way. I mean, it led to that, I suppose, in his mind, but that they believe that your commitment, your decision, your personal relationship with Jesus, right? We hear all these words. these terms was the most important thing, and they wanted to guard that. And I think we even see that with the Christian nationalist debate today, in a way. And there is this, though, this social element to religion that can't be denied. And when it is denied, you end up getting these really aggressive forms of statism. And so his point was that it hasn't taken place in the same way in the West, but whereas in communism, it was just an immediate persecution of Christians, very intense, but it's been ramped up over time in the West. And so now we are seeing that it's very possible in our minds that this could happen. And so, what are the implications? I'm not saying, I'm not attributing it all to this. I know this is just another explanation for what we've been encountering with evangelicals and the secularization and paganization. But what are the implications when churches are pushed to the sidelines, when they give up or are forced to give up their social credibility, their I guess, credibility in the public square for being authoritative. And they concede that to other institutions, to the university, to doctors, psychologists, to experts in the media. When they do that, then they're no longer relevant. And you start over time, I think, losing your traditions, your holidays, all the things that used to remind even secular people, I shouldn't say secular, but even people who were not born again believers, they had to live under this. I saw it when I was in Turkey with Islam, right? In a way, and I'm not saying that the two are completely parallel, because they're not, but even if you're not a Muslim, you're going to hear the call to prayer, right? You're constantly reminded that the default setting, that the assumptions of the society you're living in are Muslim, and that you, if you're tolerated, are a minority. And in Istanbul, it's pretty tolerant for the most part. So you are a tolerated minority, but you don't get to have authority in that. And so anyway, this gets into all these other topics, but I just think it relates to this deconstruction stuff, because when young people cast aside Christianity, oftentimes it seems like it just wasn't making that, like they reached the point where it was so replaceable. It wasn't really serving a function in their life, because they weren't saved, as the author talks about. But beyond that, there just wasn't any, like they wholesale reject it, like in every single element of it, like they reject. There's not even like a traditional component that they want to keep around. And I wonder if it has to do with that secularization. But anyway, I don't know if there's any thoughts on that.
I mean, like, ultimately the church, the church's number one goal and mission is to, provide hope for dying humanity, and to, not just that, but also instruct in biblical morality. And when the church, and I feel like this actually relates to the second article, because the pro-life movement is an excellent example of how that's kind of slidden out of the, a mission drift, how that's become a mission drift. Because when you, and I don't know, I can lead into the second article if we want.
Yeah, go for it.
So this would be the relation. Most of the people I know who deconstructed personally, because like this is ultimately, if you deconstruct fully, if you reject Christianity, that's pretty big deal, especially if you grew up in it. You're saying that the only way, like, you did believe, or at least you aspired to believe, that you're a sinner and you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity unless you put your trust in Christ. And that's a pretty significant, like, that's the most significant thing that there is. So if you reject that, why would you not reject everything else? Like, of course you're going to reject everything else. And when the church, if the church is wishy-washy or wonky on that at all, then of course it's going to be wishy-washy on every social, societal issue too. And a lot of the people that I knew, like in college, that deconstructed, and I think I've shared this before, but when I went to a very like secular, very left-leaning school in upstate New York that was staffed by a lot of ex-hippies who had come to New York for Woodstock and never left. So it was a extraordinarily left-wing place. But there was a fairly robust like Christian group on the campus that I went to. And we did quite a few events. I mean, we can talk about the abortion debate because I feel like that's what I thought of when I was reading this article. But there was a pro-life group on campus that was mostly Catholics. And I'll never forget, this was my first exposure because like I knew about abortion, I knew it was a horrible thing. I knew it was a big issue. It was never something that I think interested me a ton in like as much as other, apologetic issues or moral issues or political issues, because I think it's because it has to do with pregnancy and birth and women, and I'm a guy and I just didn't really think about it a whole lot. But I always knew it was evil. And when I was at college and we scheduled that debate, you remember because you were the one who did the debate, and yep. I was kind of behind the scenes. This is actually 10 years ago. It's just a little over 10 years ago. I was behind the scenes, like doing all the setup, and I'm like coordinating who's gonna moderate the debate, who are we going to debate it, who are you going to be debating, and then like trying to get other clubs to join in and be a part of this. And so I'm thinking like obviously we'll have our group, and then we'll have the main Christian group on campus. Like I would assume that they would want to be a part of this. They didn't. And
That's right.
the Secular Student Alliance did, because they were the ones who staffed the other side. But then the one that to me that would have been the most obvious of any group was the pro-life group. Like literally that is the point of your group. But
yeah, I forgot about that, but you're right. They didn't want to sponsor or be associated in any way with.
Do you remember why?
No.
Because I do, because I had the meeting. I had the meeting with the head of the pro-life club. She wanted to meet me and talk about her concerns. And I was like, concerns for what? Like, isn't this fantastic? Your whole thing is being pro-life, and we're going to debate it on campus. Like, it's the marketplace of ideas. And she said, and basically it all came down to one thing. She was concerned that we might show pictures of aborted fetuses. That's right. And if we did show pictures of aborted fetuses, then they didn't want to be a part of it because, that can cause a lot of trauma. And I remember just thinking at the time, like, who gives a crap?
Yeah, there was a little a video I think I showed that I think I did show some aborted fetuses, and I think I warned everyone. But yeah, it was part of the
presentation. And I suggested that, like, we can do a warning. We can we can tell people, hey, this is going to happen. Like, if you're going to get triggered by this, then you don't have to be a part of this. But that was the first time that I realized, oh, the pro-life movement isn't as pro-life as I thought it was. And then this came up over and over and over again in different forms. And so then when last year when Roe v. Wade got overturned, and like everyone's sort of like, oh yay, we won, and you're like, no, you didn't win. You still have to pass it in all the states. And they're like, no, we won. This is a great victory. You can go into that, but there's a correlation there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I remember the other Christian group on campus that we thought would probably be somewhat supportive decided, I think they scheduled that night like a ultimate Frisbee competition, literally to try to take people away from the event. It was one of the most amazing, it was an eye-opening thing. I feel like these past 10 years, I've just had one eye-opening red pill moment after another. Like thinking it's one way and then realizing, oh man, it seems like it's worse than I thought it was. And that, I guess that's kind of a depressing thought, but I think it's good to know what your actual numbers are, what you're actually dealing with. And but it went well. The event went well. I remember that. And
I mean, somebody flipped you the bird midway, but
I think that,
I got your camera. How was video recording it?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's on, I think, my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. But so anyway, the article though, let's talk about that. So this is pro-life except in the cases of, and it's by one of our editors, Jan Weaver, who volunteers her time. She's really good at what she does to edit articles that you all submit. And I didn't even give the plug at the beginning. I probably should have, but if you go to truthscript.com, scroll to the bottom, there is a publish tab. You click on that and there's a form you can fill out if you want to submit an article. We also, by the way, take donations. It is 501c3. So if you feel compelled to donate to what we're doing, I know we would all, David especially, would appreciate that. And it enables us to do more. And I think right now a lot of people are desiring that, wanting an evangelical Christian organization to address issues people are actually asking, and not to be afraid of those things. And that's kind of what Truthscript does. So go through the article then. Maybe I should read some of it. I don't know. I mean, it's kind
Well,
of,
it kind of has a like a tipping point because
yeah.
I don't know if we want to kind of do the big reveal, but uh, you know, Jan talks about, which just kudos to Jan. Jan really was very transparent in writing this, and I'm sure this was a very, very difficult thing to write. But this is the kind of stuff that the pro-life community really needs to read, and I would really recommend, if you haven't read it yet, read it and share it to, like, especially if you have people in your church who are really rah about pro-life stuff. I think they would probably get a lot out of this. But she starts off talking about the whole rape and incest, so exceptions for rape and incest.
She talks about Holy Post. She talks about Phil Vischer and Sky Jathani, who co-hosts the Holy Post. I thought it was Jathani. Is it something else? Jethany?
I thought he was a Star Wars.
Okay. Skywalker and okay, all right. I always thought it was Jathani, but either way, Sky
Jathani is not super worried about abortion.
Yeah, he thinks that it's not about what laws you have on the books, but whether or not you can reduce the number of abortions. That's the main thing, and he thinks that he has a better formula for addressing that through social justice rather than making abortion illegal, basically. And so she critiques that as pragmatism, and she talks about, I guess, just how this kind of like the frog in the kettle, how this gradually moves people from my body to my body, my choice, to this, because that's the underlying assumption here, really. Because as soon as you assume that it's an actual person, then that changes everything, right? And so then I guess is the big story. She goes through critiquing this because she thinks it starts with, for Christians at least, this idea that, except in the cases of rape and incest, right? And then that moves you to my body, my choice position. But she wants to nip it in the bud. And the way she does it is she tells this story about this girl, 15-year-old Anna, and how Anna gets pregnant. And it's pretty well written and it's pretty emotional. And I don't know if you want to, talk about that at all, or.
I think it might be best to let people read it, because if you just kind of talk about it, and if she tells the story and the story is it hits hard.
It is probably one of the better, to send to a Christian at least, pro-life or anti-abortion articles that you could send to someone to really just kind of jolt them a little bit. It's well done. So check that out. Pro-life, except in the cases of.
And if you ever hear anybody say, well, I'm pro-life except for, in cases, which I've heard it a few times. You don't hear that a lot. I feel like in Christian circles, you might hear it more in like neocon circles. But I think, didn't President Trump say something to that effect not too long ago?
I don't know if it was
Roe v. Wade. Or like they should have allowed exceptions for this or that. I mean, I feel like that's a Republican talking point. That's like basically every Republican. It's like, we're pro-life, but we need to have exceptions.
Yeah, Trump's all over the place though, because remember 2016 he was saying women should be punished for it, and everyone lost their mind. And now, that makes sense though. I'm pretty sure, because I remember I was with Senator Steve King once at a dinner a few years ago, and he told a story about meeting with President Trump on the issue of abortion. And he brought, actually, it's kind of funny, he brought a woman from Iowa with him, I guess. And she had, I guess she had an experience where she was raped, had a child, and is against the exceptions, the rape incest exceptions. And so she's sitting there in the Oval Office with President Trump, just met him, and with Steve King. And Trump, I guess, pulls Steve King aside and basically says, where do you find these people? Because he just could not believe that someone who had gone through that experience would be supportive of not allowing abortions for other people going through that experience to alleviate it somehow. He says, where do you find these people? And Steve King said they're all over the Midwest, Mr. President. But yeah, I mean, that, so whether or not it's public, I know privately President Trump has said that. And that is kind of like I guess that's like the default setting for most Republicans is, well, we're pro-life, but there's those exception cases. So anyway, I should probably just ask. There's some people in the private chat here. I'm just going to see. Do you want to tell your story first, or do you want to go to some people in the private or in who are waiting to come on first, and then go to your story?
We can let some people come on.
All right, Mark. I'm going to pitch it to you here. So make sure you're unmuted. Let's see if I can. There you go. Hey, Mark.
Hey.
I see your hand.
What's going on?
Howdy, Mark.
Hey. Yeah, so for those who don't know Mark on Twitter, I don't know if you just started doing.
He's the 9 marks. 9 marks.
Oh yeah, you're Mark Dever. You're Mark
Dever. Yes. That's
Mark,
me.
You seem a lot happier than.
I'm sorry about the conference. I'm sorry the moments down, but.
Yeah, sorry. Your conference was canceled, Mark Dever.
Well, I'm so overjoyed at the two fellas in the back. That were cuddling on the couch. They got their moment in the spotlight that everyone could see. That's what I'm excited about.
Okay. Well, you have a lot of videos you post on Twitter doing construction. Is that what you do? Are you like an independent contractor?
I'm trying to be, but right now I'm getting the experience.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. So I work for Wharton Home Improvements. I'm in Western Maryland right now in the tri-state area. So West Virginia and Pennsylvania, all right here together.
It's good Appalachian territory.
Yeah. So we're doing multiple jobs right now, multiple additions, renovations. We even build whole entire houses. So what I'm doing now, since Elon Musk has opened up ad revenue sharing for everyone, I've been making excuses about not creating content and doing podcasts or whatever online for years and watching people talk about it and all that. And I finally said, what am I waiting for? It clicked and I'm going after it now. So I'm posting on Twitter and other places, but I've also bought the domains for makeyourmarkcraftsman.com and .net. And I'm going to be setting up LLC, getting a website going so I can bring this all together into a website, showcase my abilities and so forth, have a brand presence online, but also build up locally and whatever so that I can, get my own thing going.
Cool. Awesome. I think you're doing it right because you're focusing on something that you enjoy, you're good at, and a lot of people, I think, make the mistake of trying to get involved in like a political discussion or a theological discussion when they just don't really have sometimes that's just not their thing, right? But they care about it. We all should care about those things. But I've advised people, like, find your thing, find the thing that you really enjoy and like to talk about that lights you up. And you're definitely you're definitely motivated about construction and stuff. So I'm
all in on it because it's so wide open. For people who are on the fence about what to do, especially young people, get into trade work now because there is so much work. Everyone's always going to need a toilet, going to need a receptacle to plug their devices into, and going to need a roof over their head. Yeah. And robots cannot do those jobs. Robots cannot frame a house. They can't build a deck. They can't do that stuff. Get into it now. It's wide open. Make it happen.
Yeah. Good advice from Mark Dever from 10 marks, I guess. 10 marks construction.
10 marks to
hey, did you have anything to add to the show, or I don't know if any of the topics?
10 marks, a healthy deck. That's what I'm going for.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I think the deconstruction stuff, it's goofy. It's just another way to like be edgy and weird and not really be a Christian. Like what? It's unbiblical. Why would you say I'm a Christian and I'm going to start just piece by piece tearing off everything that makes you an actual Christian. I don't understand the point. Are you following Christ? Or are you just like doing what you want to do?
Well, you kind of
So
bring up an
anyway,
interesting point too, because it is kind of trendy to do it in stages. And I feel like I had this conversation yesterday with my wife. Like, you're talking about somebody who has made some, like, I left this church and I'm gonna go to this church, or I don't know, I just don't know how I feel about the tone here, and then like, in my mind I'm like, okay, so you're deconstructing, like you're not in anymore, like you decided this isn't for you, maybe you were never saved, I don't know, like I don't know how far you're gonna take it, but it's sort of like this gradual, like, oh, I'm gonna do it in steps, like I'm gonna do it like a TV show, like this is season 1. And in season 1, I leave my original church and go to like a little Woker church. In season 2, I get a tattoo. In season 3, I start vaping. And then like, it's kind of goes.
yeah. Well, and you'll notice, I think the tell is the fact that they have to announce it. If this is just what you're doing, you don't have to announce it to people. Why do they make it a point to let everyone know this is what we're doing? And to your point of the trendiness, look at the people who are deconstructing, in the public eye. Your Christian rappers and your Christian musicians and, your Christian cartoonists and all that kind of stuff. So it's people, it's kind of like the reality shows. It's when famous people started dropping down to the B list and the C list and the D list, and then all of a sudden they would be on a reality show to try to get popular again. I don't know. I just think, honestly, it's for attention. Why are you talking about tearing your salvation and your belief in Jesus Christ as a risen Lord and Savior of your life? And you're going to talk about how, well, I'm just going to keep stripping all this stuff of biblical Christianity away from my life. I don't understand the point. So
yeah, they're not just doing it with even Christianity though. They like it also gets into, usually even the deconstruction stories start out with like a political thing. Like, I grew up in a Republican household and we were patriotic and we supported the president or whatever. And then I realized that the Republicans are just awful. And that, like, it leads to the reason that we were supporting Republicans was because we were Christian. So Christianity must also be awful. And it's like every single element of their childhood and any attachments that they formed at that time must all be severed, must all be rejected. It's a remaking of oneself. It's like a new. It is like being born again in a.
It's a conversion.
Secular,
it's a
pagan,
conversion.
but it's born again to what you want.
Right.
It's conforming it to human desires of whatever you want your image to be. A lot of times, it's not conforming to Christ. Yeah. So, yeah.
I agree, man. I totally agree.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, appreciate you, Mark. Thanks for the support.
Thanks, Mark.
And we'll talk to you later. All right. Oh, I cut Mark off. Sorry, Mark.
Sorry, Mark.
That was kind of rude of me there. He's giving me the thumbs up. All right. So, so the last article is written by actually you. So
I wrote it. I gotta see if I can remember what I wrote.
Well, I mean,
this was a very emotional. This was a lot more emotional than I expected. Like, I had a very hard time writing this, and I'm not sure why. But every year, and I was kind of interested to see what your memories were too, since obviously you were 11, I was 9 when this happened. But every year around September, I don't know if this is different because we're New Yorkers and because we were pretty close to where this happened. But every year around September,
I was 12, but
you had just turned 12, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was almost 10. Every year around September, for several days, I just have like, you'll be reminded that it happened, and I'll always find myself like digging into like some of the dark side of the event, like when the people were jumping out of the buildings. That's one that sticks in my head, like really very strongly. And every year around the anniversary, I'll kind of drift into this, just like remembering, because it's so vivid. And when I was reflecting on it this time, because it's just the weird thing about this year is, and I kind of mentioned this in the article. This is a few paragraphs down, but I said it's incredibly surreal to realize that 20 years have now come and gone since that time. And I just talked about how like my perspective on this recently has sort of shifted, like sort of politically. Like I don't, and I'm not really on the, I have a lot on my plate, so I don't have a lot of time for like digging into conspiracy theory stuff. So a lot of the time when I have discussions with people about like, did this happen or this happen, I can at least say at this point, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't really know everything that happened that day. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that, like, though I do know that, like, the whole political narrative around that we kind of, like, especially on the right, were almost pigeonholed into. Like, we were really, really rah for Iraq and Afghanistan and everything around that. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what the administration knew. I don't know what anybody knew. I'm just not sure. I have lots of questions. What I do know is, is what I remember being 9 years old and seeing all that happen. And that was like and just an intense loss of innocence, and that's true I think for a lot of people. And, anybody who was coming of age during that time, but, being around 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, that's a lot to be exposed to in a very short time. Like I remember distinctly, and I mentioned this as well, I didn't know what Islam was. I still remember not knowing before 9/11 what Islam was, and afterwards knowing what it was. Like I had no idea. And so you're asking these questions that just challenge your entire paradigm. But I don't know. I would go into some of my takeaways in the end. But what do you remember about that day?
I don't know. You could do a whole podcast on that. I don't want to talk too much. I remember sitting there. Well, we had a town day the day before, so so I think it was it on a Monday that 9/11 happened?
It was Tuesday. So the town day was Sunday.
Was Sunday, I guess. So maybe there was another. Okay. So I remember that happened right before, and it was a very clear day, and we were having breakfast in the kitchen, and that's when Mom got a phone call, and it was I remember it was well, I don't know if I want to say the name. Well, it doesn't really matter, I guess. It was Mike Olchevoy, I think. It was another around our age, and he said, "Hey, the United States is under attack," or something. And my mom ran to the living room, turned on the TV, and the second plane had not hit yet. It was just the first.
It was like a couple minutes though before. I mean, we turned it on right before the second plane hit.
Yeah, we turned it on, and then the second plane hit, and then the TV was on the rest of the day, and like a bunch of, I think the networks though started going out because I don't know. I guess some of the towers or what. I think we had an antenna, and or maybe it was the cable. I don't remember, but we didn't have access to all the channels, and then they started piping in Fox News, and that was on for the next 3 days or so. And I remember that night, or it was either that night or the night after. I think it might have been that night. There was a special service at the church, and for the next few weeks, we saw all kinds of people showing up to church that we had never seen, just from the community. And I remember Dad started a series on Islam at the church, and that was so everyone was learning about that. There was such a high demand to know, what is this threat? What is this new enemy we have, basically? And I remember I took it in on so well that I remember I was at a restaurant once, and we had a waiter. It was with some friends right after that, and I was conversing with one of them, and I said that Islam's not a religion of peace, or they say that, but that's not really that's not what jihad is. And anyway, I mean, I was just repeating what I had heard in some of these in some of the, I guess, the materials that we were learning. And I remember the waiter though happened to be Islamic and got really super defensive, was just really, and I had to kind of say, hey, sorry, man. I wasn't even talking to him, but he just got really upset about it. And so tensions were high on that front. Now he didn't, no, it was more just you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm Islamic, and Islam means peace and stuff. So now I know he didn't know what he was talking about either. But it was just high tensions. And then I remember not long after that, we were flying, I think, to California or something as a family, and it was the first time I had seen the security measures, like the insane security measures. We were searched. And I just remember thinking, as we were walking in the airport, this will never last. This isn't going to last. People aren't going to stand for this, because this is like harassment. And I don't know if you remember, at the time there was a whole debate about the new, like, sort of X-ray or whatever they were, however they were, like, getting body images of people, the new machinery they were putting in there. And there was a whole debate about whether that was inappropriate or not, whether perverts would be looking at these images. There was a whole debate about racial profiling. And that was a time when conservatives were pushing for it. Yeah. That's funny, right? Now today, that would never happen, post 2020, especially. But back then, there was a lot of conservatives who thought, like, why not? Like, if it's young Muslim men who are doing this, who look Arabic, then why don't you, like, target, like look at them when you're doing the pad downs and stuff. And there was all these stories about, like, frail old ladies from the Midwest getting, like, inappropriately touched and stuff. And so there's just all this turmoil. And so I guess that nothing's changed in that regard. Things have gotten worse as far as social turmoil, but I think it's surreal looking back. Maybe that's why it was hard for you to write it, because you're looking back on what is the end of a different age. You didn't realize you were in it at the time, but now looking back in retrospect, you do realize that 9/11 was the end of something. I think it was, when we talk about, like, post World War II era, I think 9/11 was the end of that, effectively. That was, or at least the beginning of the end. Like, that kind of notion that America, some people say this ended in 89 when the Berlin Wall fell, but I don't think so. I think in the 90s, America was still on kind of a very Cold War footing. And I mean, I'm a child. I grew up, I was born in 89, and I would consider myself part of that. Like, there was still very much a patriotism. You saw it in civic rituals like Flag Day and things like that. People showed up for those things. The movies on television, very patriotic, but it was, like, mostly based around World War II, that we were the good guys in that conflict. And then every conflict since then, we were also the good guys, and we're a force for freedom, and America's good, and America believes in God. That's one of the things that makes us good. And everyone just believed that. 9/11 was the end of that, I think. And that's why I think part of it's hard to look back at it, because it's like seeing, you wonder what could have been. You wonder whether that could, you see an opportunity for national revival in that situation. Like, people were coming to church for a little bit, and then they stopped. People were putting their flags all out, and you felt like you were one with everyone for just a little bit, like you were actually together as Americans. Even Democrats and Republicans for, like, a week or two were sharing the same sentiments. And it just felt like we were one. Like, Americans were Americans. We had a common enemy. And it was like, we're going to go back to the way we were, World War II, during that conflict. And it just wasn't to be. That just did not last. And so seeing the division now, I think it's just depressing a little, because you're just like, we had that moment, and now it's totally gone. And now, not only is it gone, but we're cynical about it. Like, we look at it and we say, hey, that's what they used to get the surveillance state in. And, all that stuff that we meant for surveilling or protecting ourselves was used against us, and is still being used against us. And we have a weaponized deep state that's imprisoning January 6th prisoners. It's so surreal. The guy, George W. Bush, who was the president at the time of 9/11, who would have thought that he would say something like January 6th was, like, just as bad or worse than 9/11? Like, that, it's insane. And you just think, well, it makes you not trust him. And at the time, you had so much trust in him that he really loved this country.
You remember the Yankees, the Yankees playoffs right after when he threw the opening pitch?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I mean, that was a moment.
Everyone
you
cheered,
still
yeah.
can get chills thinking about that moment. It was incredible. Like there, I don't know if there ever was a cheer in the United States like there was that night at that game. You
Yeah.
know, because like what every, you know, and he just, you know, he threw a baseball, but what it represented to it, because it was in New York,
Yep.
you know, and it was just it was amazing, you know.
Well, we
And
were
you could-
we were close to it too. I think you mentioned that we
78
live
miles.
not far.
We were 78 miles from the towers.
So we went down to a funeral of someone who had died in it. We knew people that were in the towers in our church who had gotten out. We were like, if we went up to Mount Beacon, which wasn't far, we would have
You would have
seen
been
the
able to see
smoke.
the smoke.
Yeah.
And
It wasn't all that far. And, you know, I think that also plays into it, like just being that close to it. Every town in our area has 9/11 memorials, and every single one of them has a piece of the World Trade Center at those memorials. I remember, you know, there was just funerals all over the place for months after 9/11. You don't forget that kind of thing. I remember there was one funeral on TV. They had funerals. There was a funeral for firemen, and I remember during the funeral, in the middle of the funeral, this Irish fireman, because in New York City, the firemen traditionally are mostly Irish, but he just starts, you know, threatening Osama bin Laden in the middle of this funeral, and say, and no one turned off the no one thought it was inappropriate. Everyone just like cheered for him basically, and just, I mean, people were united. They were angry. Everyone wanted to sign up. I was depressed that I was 12 and I couldn't sign up. Friends who were older than me did, and one of them I knew in the church went to Afghanistan, and he was viewed as a hero. I mean, he got so much respect for that. I remember at the time he came back in his uniform, and everyone was just shaking his hand. And you know, you see people join the military today, and it's not the same. Like, it's just not.
well,
You know?
the people who are joining the military today have no memory of 9/11. They were
No,
born after
no.
it. So
No, but I'm saying like the way they're treated, like as conservatives, even like, you know, someone joins the military and conservatives are the ones that are saying, "Hey, man, I don't know if you want to do that. You know, did you get the jab? Do you really want to work for those people?" Like that's the crazy thing, because back then it was both left and right were just like, you know, yeah, everyone go. And
yeah.
so it's yeah, it's you were. I think, you know, grandchildren will ask one day, what was that like? It'll be like, you know, when we were asking the World War II generation, what was it like? People are going to ask us, what was it like before 9/11? It's like an event of that magnitude, I think, in a way.
Yeah. Well, in the midst of the black pills, there's
Does everyone enjoy the black pills?
There's a few. I mean, the end of what I tried to do at the end, and I really prayed hard about this because this is what made it so hard. I think was trying to figure out what blessings are there. And so I thought of Philippians 4, Philippians 4, 6 and 7. You know, it says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything with prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." Because I feel like it's impossible to think about this without feeling anxiety. Like, because when you just start connecting everything that you basically just laid out, it's pretty anxiety and inducing. And so, like, biblically, the response is supposed to be actually first thanksgiving. So even thinking about something like that, like, what are blessings? What can we be thankful for? So 3 things that I guess kind of came to me. One was just the reminder of depravity, which can be a blessing because it can wake people up. Our proximity to it, I think, is somewhat important because, like you said, people are very cynical about this now. You know, and if especially if you live really far away from it, you know, we experience this in a way that it was in our face every single day with people. Like, we would hear people talking about, yeah, I was in the South Tower, you know, and I was on this floor, and we managed to get out in time. And my best friend's father actually, his testimony, like how he came to a serious faith in Christ, was through his experiences there. He was a police officer. But you know, so that was one blessing, was just people did wake up. But the one thing that really like jumped out at me when I was thinking about this, and I mentioned the Titanic. So my wife and I went to a Titanic museum in Pigeon Forge here in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
And it's extremely well done. It's one of the, like, it's weird that a Titanic museum is in the middle of Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains, but that's where it is. And it's it's very, very well done. And one of the things that hits you with the Titanic is like, what was the point of this? You know, you have all this, you have, I think it's close to 2,000 people died. And just because, you know, they just ship hit an iceberg. Like, but when you start digging into these individual stories, you know, it's not just interesting. It's like, it's very inspiring, because the Christian ethic of the time during the Titanic was, and the movie, actually, I had never seen the movie. I watched it recently. The movie is extraordinarily inaccurate. The rule almost was that it was a pretty gentlemanly affair. Like, women and children got on boats as much as possible. And so many men just resigned themselves that they were going to die fairly immediately, and behaved like men the entire time and died like men. And even if the event, regardless of what caused the event, that is a profoundly good thing. Like, that's a profoundly biblical precedent, to face death, which is the you know, the most fearful of all things, and to be able to face it and look straight in the eyes and do the right thing, like in the midst of it, and, you know, act in a Christian way. And the one thing with 9/11 and the parallel there is, like, so many people just rushed right into the jaws of death.
Yeah.
Thousands, like over 400 firefighters died at 9/11. You know, I mean, there's a bunch of famous pictures. There's one picture taken from the George Washington Bridge, where there's a fire truck that's headed inbound to Manhattan, and every guy on that truck died. And they got there just in time to run in and die. You know,
Yeah.
and like, this might sound like a ridiculous stretch, but the whole discussion of like, who are my people, and like nations, and like, as somebody from New York, when I hear those stories, I'm like, man, those are my people. I love those people. Like, I love those New York, Italian, Irish, you know, like, I feel like I understand them. I get them. I love them. I want them to know Christ. I don't live there now, but like, I could see myself going back as a missionary one day, just because I have like, those are the people I grew up around. And 9/11 is like the principal event where the wonderful qualities about that culture were just on full display. And like, it's ridiculously inspiring, you know. So I don't know, that's a positive thing. Like, it's heartbreaking, it's awful, it's horrific, but there was a lot of like incredible heroism and bravery, and like, those stories should be told. Like, that is a Christian thing. That is a uniquely Christian virtue, to share these stories and like hold these guys up as, hey, you want to know what a man is? That's a man. And it's something that is just like, every year we go through this. Every year we have this remembrance. You know, they read all the names and everything, and like, at the evangelical church in general, is like, they don't do that. Like, they're not pointing to these guys who, you know, stared death in the eye and drank it down like water. You know, it's like, we look at MLK as our guy, or it's like, here's your hero. Like, this is what biblical sacrifice looks like. And I don't know, 9/11 is a really good excuse to do that, to look at that. So there's that. And then the other thing I mentioned at the end was just, even though, and you just mentioned it, like, a lot of people flocked into church, and then, you know, church attendance rates did not go up. They've gone, you know, down pretty dramatically since 9/11. But you know, being close to it, I think we both know a number of people who came to Christ, and I've heard plenty of testimonies of people who came to Christ because of their experiences that day. So God was at work. He did draw people to Himself through that event, which regardless of, you know, whatever the politics, whatever the situation around it, like, He was still at work even in that darkness. So yeah, that's pretty much
He
all
was. Yeah, I think that it is a little bit like our World War One. You know, the way that World War One influenced the British psyche. We didn't get there, and we basically got there in time to win the war. And then, of course, World War II, I think, damaged our psyche to some extent. But we also, I don't know, there was an optimism in the 50s right afterward that we were, the world was on a track for more freedom, that was inevitable, and all. And you know, today we know this is this classical liberal kind of post-war World War II consensus talk. But with 9/11, I do think that it parallels in some ways what happened to the American psyche in general is kind of like what happened to the British psyche during World War One. there was like this rah-rah at the beginning of World War I. I mean, the British people couldn't wait to get over there and get involved. And by the end of the war, when they had seen the devastation and sacrifice, it changed them. And one of the changes was this kind of, maybe this ties into the first article, this kind of feeling that, you know, it was God. I guess there was an optimism that they felt, an expectation that they felt God was going to just always give them victory or something. And when victory didn't even feel like victory, there was a question of, you know, how can God let these bad things happen? And so, yeah, 9/11 is a smaller event, obviously, but I think because of media and because, I guess just because it's so out of the ordinary in the modern world, I guess now we have all these shootings. So maybe it's becoming more normal to see that. But at the time, we didn't have that. I mean, it was just out of nowhere. I think that the kids, the people who are our age watching that, they're the ones who are deconstructing now, many of them. And is that connected? Probably to some extent. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, someone says that these guys don't seem like proto New Yorkers to me. Yeah, that's a.
Well, we're not. I mean, like we're pretty mixed up. You know, parents from California, family in Ohio and Mississippi, and you weren't even born in New York. I just made it by a couple of months. So I mean, that's kind of the strange thing. I've had to. You went through this when you moved south, and I moved south now, and there's a weird like. I don't know if we want to get into this, but like the whole fortify the red states, like let's you know, fortify the red areas, everyone, like, you know, get out of your blue area and get to a red area, which I'm on board with to the extent that I did it. But there you do start asking these questions of like, who are my people? Who are my, like, what is my what is my culture, I guess, is part of it. Like, because you'll be in situations where you don't feel like you fit in. And the ironic thing, and like 9/11 brings this home for me, is I realized like I really do feel at home with Italian New Yorkers, and I married one, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, I think that's like most people, or a lot of people, are in that position where they moved around a lot, and especially as broken families and going between parents and things. I mean, people, pieces of themselves are everywhere. It's really a tragedy of the modern world. And it's funny if you look at like cultures, you know, the Scots-Irish tend to be they're explorers. No matter where they go in the English-speaking world, they end up being on the frontier somewhere doing some rugged thing. Like, that's just kind of who they are. And you know, you can see in New York, you know, Italians they're so family oriented, they stay together. In fact, when you go past like Kingston, New York, you don't really see as many Italians anymore. You know, you'll see some in Albany, but like they don't get out into those. They're certainly not in Western New York. They tend to stay together. That's why they gradually move places. They're just a different culture. And so, you know, there are cultures who are more nomadic, who are like able to move around and be okay with that, and kind of keep their cultural stuff, their identity intact. But I think in general, though, people are made to they have a home. You know, even the Jewish people who have been, I mean, there's an example of a group of people who have been all over the world, who've been kicked out of so many countries, and they've kept their identity. Part of the reason for it is because they have a homeland, even if they're not in it. They know where it is. They know it's in Israel. They know that they have a place to go. And that's what happens when Jewish people go to Israel, who have never even been there. They feel like they've come home, that there's a place of belonging there. And so I think I think that's the challenging thing, and not challenging, but it's when you're someone like myself and you, who I was born in California, but I have a lot of family in Mississippi, but I'm living in New York. You feel at home in all these different places and in different ways. And when I was in Virginia, there's part of, you know, things I missed about New York, but now that I'm in New York, there's a lot of things I miss about Virginia. So it's just, there's beautiful things all over the place that God's made. And I think for having a family, probably the important thing is just to decide, okay, what kind of a legacy do I want my kids to have? You have a choice in this to some extent. Like, who do you want them having shared experience with as they're growing up? And I think you made the decision that you wanted your daughter to be around people who are going to reinforce the Christian value system you grew up with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I want whatever kids I have to be pagans. No, no, I probably won't stay here long term, but I respect people who do, and I totally understand. I mean, there's no way you're getting a good slice of pizza, I don't think, outside of New York.
Haven't had one yet. Haven't had one yet. Yeah.
Or a deli, a good deli, which I have
They
one
do
right
have
down the
delis
street.
here. They have delis here in Tennessee. I'm going to offend whoever the Tennesseans are, but this was actually a culture shock for me, because a deli, people, is a sandwich shop, but it's more than a sandwich shop. They also they should have some salads sitting out like in the cooler, not like antipasta salad and coleslaw, stuffed grape leaves, if maybe. So that's like not just like macaroni salad and potato salad, more than that. But then also the meats, like there should be at a minimum like salami, pastrami, and they have these things they call delis here, and there's only 3 sandwiches. It's a ham sandwich, a turkey sandwich, or a bologna sandwich, and that's it. And you walk in, and I don't know. That's been probably the biggest culture shock for me.
That's better than Virginia. We didn't even really have delis there. There was like this one bagel shop everyone raved about that was terrible in Lynchburg. It was terrible. Like, it's just and you don't want to offend the people who tell you about it. Oh, this is great pizza place, this bagel shop, but they did have better barbecue. Like New York cannot do barbecue. That's why I had to start smoking meat myself. That's actually what motivated me. And now
I feel like the barbecue in New York is actually better than the barbecue in East Tennessee. I'm going to offend people again, but
what?
Yeah, there's a couple really good spots in like Handsome Devil in Newburgh, and
I don't think I've been to that one.
Well, that's where the good barbecue is. Yeah.
Okay, so one restaurant in like a 100-mile radius.
Yeah, I haven't had a ton. There's a few decent places though. Our dad is the one that.
East Tennessee is not really known for barbecue though.
No, but they have excellent smoked meat, like cold smoked ham and bacon and stuff like that.
Virginia wasn't either. It was Virginia ham, right? But because you were in the South, there was just more barbecue around from other influences. They're really good. I mean, North Carolina have barbecue, but the really good barbecue that I had was in South Carolina and of course Texas.
Texas is the best.
Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas also has the beef mesquite. I don't know how we're on this topic, but anyway, I'm getting hungry. I should have said this at the beginning and I didn't say it. So now only, the 3 people left listening are going to hear it, but that's not true. We have more than 3. I should have just let everyone know that the retreat that's coming up, David's going to be there. I'm going to be there. It's actually, is it next week? I think it's next week.
Next week. Yeah. It's next Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday.
So this is the last opportunity. Like this is the last opportunity to sign up. You got to sign up. If you've been on the fence and you've been saying, I don't know if I want to sign up, let me wait. You can't wait anymore.
You have till midnight tonight.
Yeah. Well, it's basically, yeah. I mean, if you want to try to see if it's still up tomorrow, then you can try to see, but it's coming down soon. Cause I got to email the camp and give them our head count. So anyway, overcomingevilconference.com, overcomingevilconference.com. It's a men's conference coming up September 21st through 24th. Be there, and both of us will see you there. God bless. Have a good night, everyone.
Cheers.